So in today's video, I'm sharing 5 tasks for how to be successful in setting boundaries. Because without boundaries, you're not going to be able to take care of yourself and protect yourself in relationships. But first, if you're new, my name's Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist and I love helping people create relationships that work. So what are boundaries? They're basically limits you set for yourself that determine what you're going to participate in and when you're going to remove yourself. They're not about getting somebody else to change. They're really more about what you decide to do in any given situation, depending on how you're treated or depending on what's happening around you. And that's the power of setting boundaries. But you can't set boundaries unless you do these 5 things. So the first task that you need to do in order to set boundaries is you need to believe that you have a right to set them. Because if you don't think you deserve to set boundaries and speak up for yourself, you're not going to do it. And this is where most of us get stuck. We feel bad. We get afraid of what the other person is going to think. Maybe you grew up in a family where you were told thinking of yourself or asking for things was selfish or self-centered, and it was better to take care of others first. In a lot of cultures, people raise their kids, even their adult kids, to only think of the family, to not think of themselves at all. But here's the thing, that's not really fair. And that's not really going to work for your mental health long term. So what I want you to do is I want you to consider this. If you can take care of yourself first, and that includes setting boundaries, you're going to be able to give more to your family because you're not going to be running on empty. And that's why boundaries are so powerful, and you need to be able to give yourself permission to set them. There are going to be times where you need to say no to your family and friends because it's more about your own self-care. And that's not selfish. Because believe it or not, when you think about it, you probably have friends and family that are already doing that for themselves. They have no problem saying no or putting their own needs first because they know that that's what makes their life easier and less stressful. And that's what I want to remind you of, is that most people out there in the world are doing what they need to do to take care of themselves first anyway. That's not selfish, that's actually self-care and being able to live a healthy life. Like for instance, if you need to say no to a family event because you really have something more important and more pressing to do, sure, they may be disappointed, but in the long run, what's more important? You going to this other event that's super important or pleasing your family? Because sometimes it's really okay to choose ourselves first. That isn't selfish, that's really more about self-care, and that's what I want for you. Because learning how to set boundaries is going to be way easier when you give yourself permission to have them. Now, if you've ever struggled with setting boundaries, say me too in the comments because I'm right there with you, but believe me, you can learn how to set boundaries. The next task for how to be successful in setting boundaries is you need to care less about what other people think. Because let's face it, I have predicted what people think and feel for years. And to be honest, I've very rarely been right. Even with close family and friends, I think I know that they're going to be mad at me if I set a boundary, or I think I know what they're thinking about me, and I really don't. And it's such a waste of my time and my energy when I get sucked into doing that. Because part of what I want you to remember is that most people have good intentions, but you assuming that you know what other people are thinking about you, because let's face it, when we're making assumptions, they're usually negative, and they're probably not accurate. And what if all of those negative assumptions you're making are actually a total waste of time because they're not even thinking that? That's what I want you to remember when you're setting boundaries, because if you get into somebody else's head, it's going to be way harder to ask for what you need or to let them know that this is what you're going to do to take care of yourself. I always have to remember that if I set a boundary with someone, I have to not be in their head and just focus on me and what's good for me in that moment. In fact, a couple of months ago, somebody wanted to go to coffee with me, and I was in a really bad place, and I just didn't want to go. And what I suggested instead is let's do a Zoom chat, because that was a lot less taxing for me. Now, did I feel a little bit guilty? Sure, but my need won out, and I had to let that be okay. But I also had to not jump into this other person's head thinking, oh my God, what are they going to think that I don't want to physically have coffee with them? You know what? I had to care less about that and care more about what worked for me in that moment. And that's what I want for you, is to be able to think of yourself, not get trapped into what other people may be thinking, because most likely you're wrong anyway. So the next task for how to be successful in setting boundaries is that you need to make the boundary about something you can control, namely your own behavior, not something that's outside of your control, which is most likely somebody else's behavior. Because if you feel like you can't set boundaries, it's probably because you're trying to do something that's too difficult. And trying to change somebody else's behavior or get somebody else to do something specific for you is going to be really exhausting. But what you can do is ask yourself, what do I need in this situation? And how can I achieve that? By leaving early, by speaking up and letting somebody know that I'm hurt. Because boundaries are about what you choose in or out of in any situation. So if someone is yelling or screaming or gaslighting you, you can choose to leave. You can also choose to stay quiet if somebody else is arguing instead of getting in the middle of it. You can also let somebody know when they've hurt your feelings. Now, you can't stop their behavior, but you can say, hey, I need to let you know that what you're saying right now is really hurtful for me, and I'm going to need to walk away. That is a powerful boundary, because if you choose to leave an abusive situation when somebody is mistreating you or disrespecting you, that gives them really important information because they're going to know what your limit is. But if we don't speak up or we try to set a boundary by stopping their behavior, they're going to react negatively and it'll probably just fuel the fire in the argument. And I don't want that for you. So the next task for how to be successful in setting boundaries is you need to give yourself permission to fail. Because nobody sets boundaries perfectly the first time. In fact, this is one of those things you're going to constantly be practicing for years to come. I know for me, I still have trouble sometimes setting boundaries because they're hard and they make me feel vulnerable in my relationships. But what I've learned to do is I always find a way to take care of myself in any situation because that's the piece I can control. And I don't need other people to change or do something different for me to protect myself. There may be some people that are super scary to set boundaries with. Don't start with them. Start with the people you feel safest with. Start with those little baby step boundaries that for you might feel easier, because part of codependency recovery is allowing yourself to be imperfect, and setting boundaries is no different. There may be times where you try to set a boundary and you realize, oh my gosh, I didn't do that well at all. That's okay. You're still going to learn from every experience and every attempt you have at setting boundaries. But if you don't give yourself permission to fail, you're going to feel the pressure of trying to be perfect and doing it perfectly the first time. And I just don't think that's realistic, especially with boundaries. So for instance, if you're not ready to set a boundary, what can you do to take care of yourself instead? You could be silent instead of volunteering. You could leave the room to protect yourself. You could refrain from giving somebody advice because you need to protect yourself and not get in the fray of somebody else's business. You could also offer something you can do versus answering what you can't do. So for instance, there's a need and you feel compelled to say yes, but you really don't want to. Offer something you can do. So if somebody says, hey Michelle, I really need moving help and I don't want to move you, right? I might say, oh, you know what? Here's what I can do. If I'm too scared to speak to what I can't do, I will offer what I can do. I can help you pack. I just can't help you lift because I have a bad back. Those are some basic ways you can start to set boundaries for yourself in any situation, because boundaries need to be simply about protecting yourself from toxic behavior and making sure that your needs are taken care of first. Because believe me, when you do that, you're going to be able to give more freely in your relationships. So another task for how to be successful in setting boundaries is that you need to have a backup plan, or what I call Plan B. This is going to be super helpful when somebody disregards your boundaries, because there are going to be times when that happens and you need to accept that as part of the process. Not everybody is going to like it when we stand up for ourselves, but that doesn't mean you can't still get what you want, and that's why I want you to create a Plan B. For instance, if you're going into certain conversations with people who are more challenging to you, have an escape plan. So your first boundary might be to say how you feel, but your second boundary may be for you to leave the situation. So if you're not sure what setting boundaries looks like, go watch my video. If you want a deep dive, get my free boundaries training with Sharon Martin. Thanks so much.